Welcome back to Balance Redefined Radio. I'm Connie Sokol, your host, and I am thrilled today to introduce you to an incredibly talented, intelligent, and compassionate woman. And to find all of those characteristics in one is pretty stellar. And today we're talking about what she is most passionate about aside from her family and her beliefs. And I have to say, this story of the refugees, sometimes when we first think about it, we think, oh, well, that's there and that's way far away and that's not really a part of my life. And yet, especially in light of recent events, we can all feel the connection to that refugee experience where we have upheaval and we are suddenly in situations we had not planned on that are out of our control, and we're not sure how to respond and we don't know what's coming in that uncertainty. And in that, I think we can all relate to this refugee story. So I want to very quickly welcome our wonderful guest, Melissa Dalton-Bradford. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Connie. Thank you so much. I'm glad I'm here.
I appreciate you taking the time, and it is fortuitous. She is usually living in Germany, and she has been the amazing choreographer of 20 international moves. This woman is something to behold, and she happens to be here in our home state right now to be able to work this so that we don't have to deal with international issues. So I couldn't be more grateful for this actual tender mercy that we're able to have this conversation today. Very quickly, just want to give you some background on this amazing woman who I'm probably embarrassing by even saying that. But we're going to jump in today of what this dialogue means for you, how this can help you in your life and with your family, and being able to learn some resiliency tools, and also being able to connect with each other as sisters and brothers of the world, of being able to see each other as a world family and what that means for us, the positive, and how we can connect, and in that connection, the difference that we can make. I love to share that she is the founding member of the nonprofit Mormon Women for Ethical Government organization, and a founding member of the nonprofit Their Story is Our Story. It's fantastic, and we're going to talk about that organization just a little today. She also is the author of Global Mom, a memoir on loss and living onward, a poet, and I've read some of her poetry, which is gorgeous, an international consultant on intercultural integration, a mother of 4 children, 3 of whom are living, and a devoted Latter-day Saint. And her husband, Randall, also speaks German. And he also served a German-speaking mission. And it sounds like you taught him in the MTC.
Well,
and
he taught me.
He taught you. That's what it is. Taught in MTC, and they met and they went to BYU. Is that correct?
Yep, we did our undergrad and our grad work at BYU. That's right.
So all of these beautiful intertwined connections. Speaking this foreign language and enjoying this foreign experience and having some extra tools to be able to help those people that you're reaching. I think it's fabulous. They have spent 26 years living in Scandinavia, Asia, and Central Europe, and they currently reside in Frankfurt, Germany. I am thrilled to have you here. Now let's just jump right in. You're a lovely, beautiful, intelligent, well-read person. And when we think of people helping refugees, we think of they're in, the trenches and down in this muck and just okay. But you have been all of it. You have helped on a UN level. You've helped on a right there, hands-on level. Tell us how you got into this whole experience.
Well, we like to call it divine choreography at TSOS. I happen to have just moved with my family from Geneva, Switzerland to Frankfurt in 2014. And some of our listeners might remember, I know that you do because we've talked about this, Connie, how the news exploded with these stories of refugees moving by the thousands, tens of thousands out of war-torn Syria and other places in the Middle East to the West. And we saw stories of these families, children in arms, backpacks, crossing the Aegean Sea from Turkey to Greece and making it into Europe. Well, I had just settled in sort of for what I thought was going to be a ho-hum. How long are we going to be in Germany? It's very, very calm. I didn't have major projects on the table. And then these train loads of people who had been displaced arrived at the Frankfurt main train station, at the Frankfurt Hauptbahnhof. And I was there with crowds of people welcoming them. Bringing baskets of clothing, bags of food, big signs above our heads, welcome to Germany. And my very close friend, whose name is Trisha Leimer, who's an American married to a German, living in the same church congregation in the center of Frankfurt with me, her daughters high school gym was transformed overnight into a first reception center for refugees. And Tricia said, I'm going to go in and I'm going to help. Do you want to come and help too? And so within a matter of weeks, we were sitting on high school bleachers. Think of this, just think of your kids' high school gym, right? But the whole thing is vacated and now it's stacked wall to wall with donated bunk beds. And there are 180 people, old people, parents, newborn babies, all living in this space. And that's where Tricia and I started, we thought, helping them learn German, but what we started to experience was everything they could teach us. And that's where we started learning about their stories. They would pull up their Android, their smashed-faced Android, cell, and they would start showing us the pictures. Here's my town before it was bombed out. Here's my family before they were killed. Here's what it looked like when we were crossing that mountain range and that mountain range and hiding in the bushes. And here's footage from us crossing the Aegean Sea in an inflatable raft, holding our babies above our heads. Just all of those stories. And we decided, yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? But it's not something that's a movie. It's not something that's remote. We were sitting knee to knee, elbow to elbow with these people. We were first-hand witnesses to their stories as they shared it. And we thought, man, if the rest of the world could be sitting where we're sitting, we would respond in a different way, probably, because my heart was drawn to them. So the way their story as our story began was literally with that human contact and stories. And we said, if we could help collect these stories and then share them with the rest of the world, it would empower the refugees, our friends that have real names, real families, real stories. It would empower them to speak for themselves. And it would also help us all recognize exactly what you said, Connie. That is that we are all sisters and brothers. We're part of one big family. We are not so different from the people that I'm sitting next to on the bleacher in the high school gym. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And I love what you share, that you got eye level and listened to their experience. As I did not know much about the refugees, we're so far away from that experience, we feel, until we had some that came into our state. And it was incredible to me, the stories, and even the stories that I'm reading. They've been traveling for 5 months. Half of these refugees are children. Women are giving birth along the way with nothing, with no medical supplies, nothing. And then they come into an area, like you said, when they cross the Aegean Sea. I saw pictures of these people, 40, 52, a raft. I mean, it's unbelievable. You keep looking at the picture and they're inches from the water. And this is an open sea and these babies and children. And then you think, well, what would make someone take such a risk? Even the stories of the refugees they were even forced on there. People were shot if they didn't get on the boat.
Absolutely.
But they knew, this one man said it was death to get on that boat. So it's not, sometimes I think people in other cultures or countries think, well, that's ridiculous. Why didn't they just go to a safe place? But the stories that you have heard, there was no safe place. So tell us a little bit about that. With their story is our story. What kind of stories were you starting to hear? What kind of things and needs were you starting to see?
Well, one of the first things that I started recognizing is that these were people who were very much like me. I met highly educated men and women. These weren't people that were trying to escape poverty and wanted a better life. These were people who left behind jobs as engineers, as government and army translators, as advanced mathematics teachers. We have a friend who was a Nobel Prize candidate who fled from Syria. He's now in Utah teaching at Weber State. People that were articulate and cultivated, lived in beautiful homes, had 2-3 cars, had a hunting dog, I mean, name it. They had lived lives of stability and beauty, many of them, until forces beyond their control just swept that life away from one moment to the next. So there were those people. I think those stories, specifically, I can tell you about my friend Amina. Amina is Syrian. She was an advanced mathematics teacher, a mother of 4, 3 teenagers and a younger son. And she lived in one of Syria's biggest, most advanced metropolises, and that's Aleppo. Halep is what they call it. The bombs dropped, they were driven out of their home, and when she and her husband and her 4 sons got to Turkey, they didn't have the money to pay for all of them to cross that sea. It's like $10,000 a head sometimes, depending on your smuggler, to get across the Aegean Sea. Sometimes it's 2,000, it can go as high as 10. And they simply didn't have the money.
And let me interject here. What I learned that I did not know, these smugglers, they literally would just drop them. Like they would leave them in the mountains, they'd leave them in the desert. There was no actual safe passage. They were risking their lives every step of the way,
Yes.
not knowing who to trust. And basically there was no one to trust. So yes. You're saying that they're in these situations. So continue with her story.
So Amina and her family, Hussein and their 4 sons, they have to make this agonizing decision in Turkey. Who's going to go ahead and who's going to stay? And because Amina already was highly educated and spoke some English, and she had a very young son who would probably learn the language quickest, and then the other sons that were they were in their teens, they could probably work in Turkey. That was the logic. They split up. Amina went ahead with her little 7-year-old, 6-year-old son, and the father stayed with the 3 teenage sons, thinking that, okay, maybe in a couple of months they could all be reunited. Well, as you know, and as many of our listeners know, those borders shut down, boom, 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 really quickly. And before they knew it, there was nothing called family reunification. There was no chance. So here's Amina, and I met her in that high school gym. So she's one of the first people that I met. She's the first Syrian I'd ever met in my life. She and I first started speaking in English, but then she said, no, speak to me in German. And my boy, his name is Bara, he has to speak German. Well, fast forward to last November. So it's 4 years, they were still separated. And the rule is that once you hit the age of 18, you're no longer considered a dependent on your parents. So you can't have this family reunification under
that umbrella.
They were the oldest boys were turning 18 in January. On Thanksgiving, a very merciful German judge said to Amina, and I was there with her in court as a character witness, agreed that they could have family reunification. The family was sort of like a Mission Impossible scene, really, from a movie. The family packed everything. The father and the 3 teenage sons landed at the airport in Frankfurt. We had a camera team there to capture it all on film, and now they've reunited. And they're all together in Germany now. But they're living in this teeny little apartment. They're grateful to be there, but they have to start all over, Connie. They have to start in a new language. They're in their 40s, you know. Their boys have to learn a new language. They have to learn a new culture. They have to start all over. But this woman has been, and maybe this is the thing that I want people to really sit on and think about. I have so much to learn from this woman. I have learned endless lessons of patience and tenacity. She's a fighter. She hangs on to her faith. That's what gets her through. She's been incredibly patient. That's just one of these kinds of stories of the hundreds that we've collected from in their story as our story. But it's really, really encouraging because the family's together now, right?
That is a beautiful ending to that story. And I know there are so many that do not end that way. And I love that what you have spearheaded from this incredible experience and so many others is creating this collection of stories. And in fact, if you haven't seen it, I've got a couple that I want to share from here. It's Let Me Tell You My Story. And it is fantastic. It's on Amazon. And the proceeds go to, it says right here, proceeds will fund awareness for refugees worldwide. It is fantastic. It is gorgeous. It is a beautiful book. And I feel kind of silly saying this, but the way they've laid it out it's easy to digest. And for most of us, we're thinking our lives are hard and I don't want to hear about so many more hard things. I don't know if I can take it, right? But it is in these small, simple snippets that your heart is connected to these wonderful people. I love just what you were saying about this misconception that refugees are they're kind of this dross of society and they're just trying to go from country to country that could not be further from the truth. Every story that I was reading this was a shock to them. This was a disruption of their beautiful lives. This one man that said, I'm educated. I know 5 languages. I have skills. My wife has skills. My mom has skills. My dad has skills. We can use them. I don't want economic support from any other country. I just need security. I just need peace. I just need to live. That's all of us. We all desire that for ourselves and our children, to have some kind of safety, some kind of ability to make something of ourselves in our lives. So on this note, as far as these stories, how did you get their story, our story organization off the ground? It sounded like there were different people in different pockets that were having this mind meld experience on different fronts and then coming together. Tell us about that.
Again, divine choreography, and you just said it. We really feel that we were prompted or compelled by something deeply spiritual. It was former LDS mission companions, one living in the UK, one living in the Pacific Northwest, myself and my friend living in Germany, somebody else who lives in Utah, an artist, a painter who also lives in Utah, and everybody at the same time was feeling the I don't know. I think it would be the calling to engage in this in some way. And we were all creatives. So I'm an author, somebody else was a painter, somebody else was a videographer, somebody else is a photographer. And everybody came together literally in a matter of days and said, let's get the money, let's go to Greece. A very good friend now, also a member of our faith, who was running a camp single-handedly north of Athens, said, come on, I'll introduce you to these people and maybe some will want to tell their story. Well, it turns out people lined up, Connie, they lined up. They wanted to tell their story. And that's how it snowballed. And now we're dozens and dozens and dozens of creatives, plus archivists, lawyers, journalists, all sorts of different people who don't have necessarily a background in humanitarian work or wouldn't consider themselves creatives, are all engaged doing something. We can use everyone's gifts, and all of us are volunteers. We have a terrific team now. We're now, I guess our core team is close to 100 people, plus our partners all around the world. We've been to Bangladesh, we've been to the Syrian border, we've been to Italy, we've been to France, we've been to Greece. We're collecting stories in Central Europe. Now we have a team that's gone to the Pacific Northwest, where there's a high concentration of resettled refugees, to the southern border. We're working with partners that are working along the southern border. And like you mentioned early on, I think this is important. That story is no longer something that's happening far, far away. It's in our very neighborhoods, right? This is an issue that's everywhere. There are an estimated 70 million to 75 million displaced people on the face of the earth today. And that number is not going to decrease. Look at what's happening right now, right?
Exactly. Well, and still there's war and there's still strife and all of these things that create that refugee. And with the coronavirus all over the world, the pandemic, there is a different kind of refugee where people have been stranded. People are separated from family, and we're separated from the life that we used to know. And we don't know how long this will actually last and what kind of norm we'll actually go back to. So again, as we kind of talked about at the beginning, I love that there's seeds of this that we can relate to, that, again, that uncertainty. And then, as you mentioned, I love that you mentioned this resiliency. As I was reading their stories, I could not believe the resiliency of these people of, we're going to find a way, we're going to solve a problem. There was so lacking an attitude of entitlement, of what was me. There was none of that. In fact, when we were talking before, you had mentioned about an experience where you had posted some things on, I think it was your Facebook page, and there was a lack of a negative answer that could have very well been there. Do you remember that experience?
Well, yeah, it's just been this last week. I'm here in Utah, helping take care of members of my family. I came here 3 weeks ago before the coronavirus outbreak. My husband returned to our home in Germany, so we're separated. I don't know how we'll get together again, when it will be. But we were responding to a number of really good-hearted friends from all around the world were responding to this post that I put up about how when we who have security and homes and no bombs dropping on our hospitals and access to relatively good medical care, right?
Yes.
How different that is from really the majority of the world. We don't recognize it, right? The fact that I could just jump in a car and have myself tested for coronavirus when I had all of the symptoms. By the way, I'm perfectly fine.
Good. You keep listening. It doesn't come through.
Yeah. But I was listening to that. And here's what caught me, Connie, is that because I have so many refugee friends, literally sitting in camps, and we're friends on Facebook, they were listening to this entire conversation online. I saw their names pop up in the thread. And there are people who are saying, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. If all of my kids are at home, how am I going to school them for an entire week or two? I'm just watching these understandable concerns and fears sort of scroll out on my Facebook page. Somebody saying, what are we going to do without toilet paper? Somebody else saying, I don't know whether I have enough food storage. I don't know whether I can go. Oh, we're going to have to cancel our Disneyland trip, or oh, we're going to have to cancel our high school graduation. The comments that all of my refugee friends made from Syria, from Bangladesh, from Africa, to a person, they were kind, supportive, faithful. Not a single one said, you know, you should consider how. I was thinking that because I can see the difference. I've been in the camps. I've been in the field hospitals, right? I've been there recently. But not a single one of these Syrian, Somali, Rohingya, Bangladeshi, and none of them was embittered in any way. They said, we're all part of one family. Let's help one another. Keep calm, be patient. We're all going to make it.
That is
really
beautiful.
heartwarming. It was really heartwarming for me.
Because I can't imagine that most of us probably wouldn't have some kind of witty retort of thinking, oh, woe is me. And I remember listening to Sharon Eubanks on the status of women worldwide, the talk that she gave. Her and Valerie Hudson did an evening that was beautiful.
Wasn't
and
it?
she mentioned in there, or was it there? Or was one of the other talks? Oh, we are a women's church. But she talked about, she was in a meeting and they were talking about the perils of pornography and how it was breaking up marriages and it was causing strife and it was causing these problems with these youth and with adults. And she said, in the middle of it, I get this call. There's 800,000 refugees at this border and none of them have anything to eat. What do you want us to do? And she said, I'm looking at it. And she wasn't minimizing the stress or the toll of either of those. But what she was saying is, she said, sometimes I think we have the luxury of some of those trials that we have, because we're not getting bombed and we aren't going from food, hand to mouth kind of thing every day. And even in our own communities, I know that for me, this has expanded bigger with the sense of this, food pantries in our own backyard where we go, well, I'll just drop off a few cans and I'll drop off a few things. And that's great. That's wonderful. But really looking at people and going, wow, they need eyeballs. I know my daughters, I took them to go help and the people were lined up outside. Now we had issues in our young, early married days. So I remember that, but I remember looking at them and smiling at them and wanting to say to them, I've been there. I know what this feels like. And you feel the big scarlet S for shame. And that's not it. This isn't your deal. You have had things happen to you. So many had medical things and they had to choose between diapers and paying medical bills. These are the realities. And the beautiful thing is now with this virus, I think we're all getting a taste of humanity. We're all getting a feeling of it really does let go of the outer bling and it brings us back to the nubs of who we are.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. I mean, when you face death, it wipes vanity and unessentials just off the radar. And it's not that we wish that on anyone. We don't wish that on one another, and we're not minimizing the concerns. I mean, these are real concerns. A parent with young children, let's imagine that one is immunocompromised. That anxiety starts climbing up right here. What I'm observing is this beautiful sort of turning towards one another as humanity. And what's in my mind all of the time is, what can we learn from survivors? Let's scan the horizon. And who are the ultimate survivors? Well, for me, the refugees are ultimate survivors. I know people, they've been in my home, they've sat at my table, who talked about walking from Kabul, Afghanistan to Turkey. That's like walking from New York to Seattle. And then they had to get on a boat, and then they had to walk up the Balkans. By the time they had made it to where I live in Central Europe, they had walked the distance of New York to Houston to Seattle with no Best Western hotel along the way.
No Chick-fil-A.
No Chick-fil-A, no IHOP. People, like you mentioned before, waiting to mow them down with machine guns on each border. People who could not feed their children for days. For days, they carried their children, they couldn't feed them. I'm looking to those people. I'm looking to these people who have names. Their name are Hamid and Sahar and Shakila and Tamina and Ali. I'm looking to those people and I'm wanting to learn from them. How did you do it? How did you do it if you couldn't feed your kids and you couldn't get medication and you didn't have water? How did you do it? And here you are, you're standing whole and hale now and exhausted, but you're still going forward. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. And those who are, and they have retained their kindness. Like you had mentioned before, one of the stories that I read in here was of a woman in a camp, and she said there were so many children and small children, and the people who were running the camp would beat the people and they would beat the children. And this one woman, she said, with iron rods, literally. And she said this one small child, she was crying, and the camp person came over and he said, "Why is she crying? Make her stop crying." And she said, "She's hungry." And the man said, "What she needs is flogging." And they said they flogged them all the time. And she looked at this little small child. She thought, she's not going to make that. So this woman said, "I will take that. Forgive me." But she took the beating and she was able to escape later, and someone was able to tend to her wounds. But even just months later, she had scars all over her. And I see, excuse me, forgive me, this is tender. I see this kindness. And in this coronavirus, which again, not exactly like that. We're not being bombed. I've told my friends, we have electricity. We have running water. We have, we can still go into Costco, people. So, it's not quite that level yet. But as I look at their stories and their experiences, the kindness, I see that seed and that thread in what we're experiencing now. I was on a walk with my daughter, and we saw one of my neighbors had put out a little bookcase in front of their driveway, and it had a sign, a poster that said "Free Little Pantry." And there was all kinds of things stocked on the shelf. And this was in the moment of the height of the hoarding craze. And I shared that, and it's been shared and shared and shared and shared. I can't even tell you how many times people said, "I've started one in my community." And it shifted. I said, thank you to these neighbors, because it shifted that lens from fear and scarcity mentality to kindness and abundance mentality, which is the thing that will get us through so much of these things, of every hard thing. And that's what I see in these refugees. They have found a way to be resilient and problem solving and still be kind, still retain a hope in humanity.
Yes, I've seen it over and over and over again. And in crises like this, we see people who flog, like you've just mentioned, and we see people who then feed one another. It really does highlight or bring in bold face the best and the worst in humanity, and there's some really awful things that happen in crises like this, awful, unspeakable, but we can choose also to respond with kindness. For instance, it's sickening me to think that somehow this coronavirus, which is connected, like you said, to this refugee question, that it's now being politicized or even that it's being pointed to one demographic group. That's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking for me to see that.
And it's irresponsible. Yes.
Right. Yeah. That somehow one demographic group is responsible for us, that it's something foreign. We are all on the same planet. There's no escaping it. We're all going to be touched like this. All Americans are going to be touched like this. Now, our choice is to respond with patience, to respond with generosity to one another, give each other a little bit of a break. And again, to look at the survivors. Suddenly we're thinking, what must a refugee mother feel living in a tent and she can't school her children, not for 2 weeks, but for 2 years, for 3 years? What did she do? What did she do? What did they do when their supplies were at zero? We look to the survivors and we take them as our examples. And their faith is deep. I was teaching a group of really tough looking, they were all sort of these swarthy, dark looking, bearded, young, tough Afghan and Syrian guys. They'd all walked over mountain ranges over months to make it to Europe. And I asked them, I said, what's most important? This was all kind of hidden in a German lesson, right? We were comparing what is wichtig, wichtiger, am wichtigsten. What's important, more important, the most important. I said, is it work, family, or God? So imagine you take any group of like 20-something Americans, set them at a table when they're in a really tough situation and ask them to rank those things. Every single one of those guys said, work is important, family is more important, God is the most important. Every single one. This was a table of like 25.
Wow.
That really
Wow.
teaches me something too. I think, boy, I hope that my own people would respond that same way. I hope I would respond that way.
Yes. Oh, I love that point. That is absolutely beautiful. And how in everything we go through, whether it's a health crisis, financial crisis, whatever it might be, and we're experiencing a mix of all of these, where in Utah yesterday, we were dealing with the coronavirus the first day of at-home schooling, and we had an earthquake. I mean, really, the joke was, are there going to be locusts? Is there going to be frogs, right? But I look at that and I think we have, just as you mentioned, we have the choice every single time of how we're going to respond, not react, but respond. And are we going to let this draw us closer to a higher power, whatever that is for those that are listening? Is it going to make us into better people? I remember reading about Mr. Rogers, and he said, in a crisis, always look for the helpers. And it's true. Even Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning, he said, you saw them, those people who would go through the concentration camps and they would share their bread. Look for the helpers, and it will inspire us to be able to be our better selves, to go, wait, I don't have to do it this way. This isn't a good survival skill. I can actually, kindness and love and compassion and being a better human being is actually the better way to go through this. And I want to even segue to build on this of people who are listening and are feeling like, I want to help, just like that with the free little pantry. Now people are doing them all their communities, and people who had free little libraries are turning them into free little pantries. So thinking on a personal level, what are some things that we can do with this refugee situation, even when we might feel like we are a refugee, you are a refugee, in a stunning role reversal where you are here and he's in Germany, right? Where you look at that and you think, okay, what can I do? The little bit that I can do, because we know when we're in tough circumstances, one of the best things we can do is to serve. So especially people that we can really now connect more fully with and say, my story is your story and your story really is my story. What is something that people, everyday people can do on some different scale levels?
Well, one of the wonderful things about being at least where you are geographically and where I am right now in the Intermountain West is that this is actually an unusual culture or unusual landscape for refugee volunteering. There are 60,000 asylum seekers within the state of Utah alone. There are wonderful organizations that are working overtime to respond to those needs and to help people connect, right? That's the whole point, is to help people integrate, find their way forward in a new culture. So I could list a whole bunch of organizations, beginning with the international ones that have national chapters in the United States and local state chapters like Catholic Charities, they're in Salt Lake City. The International Rescue Committee, IRC, they have a chapter in Salt Lake City. There are smaller organizations that are responding, like Serve Refugees, run by my friend Amy.
Amy Harmer?
Yeah, Amy Harmer. Yes, she's marvelous. There are there's an organization called One Refugee, run by Roger Boyer, where they're helping with educational connections for asylum seekers or first-generation refugees that are in the Salt Lake area. They're doing marvelous things. Utah Valley Refugees, that's here, run by our friend Leonard Bagalwa, who himself was a Congolese refugee. He's doing marvelous things in Utah Valley. So Cache Valley Connection, that's in the Logan, Brigham City area, so northern Utah, they're doing also marvelous things. There's a high concentration of asylum seekers in that area. And if you just did a Google search, you could find people that would be very eager to receive your time, your donations, your talent, whatever. Our own website, TSOSrefugees.org, has a volunteer how to help, a volunteer pull down tab. Now that we are all a little bit limited spatially, so we can't come in face-to-face contact with one another, perhaps, There are all sorts of things that can be done remotely to organize stories, to fundraise, to archive stories, to edit film, for instance. So we have, well, our entire organization works remotely. So there are those of us who go into the field and collect stories, but there are also many who are doing work on their computer screen right where they are with their pile of laundry on that side and their pile of Legos on that side and their canning peaches on that side. And right, so they're doing it in their own home in the middle of this really unsettled little period, unusual period that we're in. So all of those things that I've listed are ways that we can be involved. At TSOS, we're developing educational materials that will go into schools once schools ramp up again, but they will be available also online, so you could teach one another about refugees through their stories. We are working on further films. We have been making lots of visits to schools, to universities, to high schools, to give this sort of information, to share these stories.
That is so beautiful. And I know one of my dear friends, she has an organization called My Story Matters. And when she heard about the refugees, it's Amy Chandler, and she said, you know what, let's get their stories. And that's what they did for people who had cancer, children had cancer in different situations. So they went in and recorded these refugee children's stories, and then they got them into the school district so they could use them as part of their history lessons. Is that not the most beautiful thing? And now there's awareness. Now there's connection, and starting at a young age, especially for the children who have the most resilient attitude and actually can make that most quick connection between each other. And so I loved that they did that. There's so many things that can be done. I wanted to share this one experience of this one refugee who, in the thick of it, chose to use one of his talents. He said that he began a YouTube presence by playing an old upright piano in the bombed out ruins of Yarmouk. Is that right?
Yarmouk is the Palestinian neighborhood of Damascus. So one of the biggest cities. Yes.
It was unbelievable. They said fame wasn't his goal. All he wanted was to bring a little happiness into the lives of his neighbors. A classically trained pianist, him and his friends would roll the piano around the streets on a rusty green vegetable cart. Wherever they stopped, families looking for relief from endless fighting would join them, and children would sing along and with their parents nod to the music. He said, I wanted to give them a beautiful dream. I wanted to change this black color at least into gray. And I've seen this happen even with the coronavirus. People are singing to people in rest homes by remote, and grandparents are reading stories over Zoom to their children at night and to extended family and other people. And I love that everyone can do a bit. I know a couple of years ago, a few other ladies and I felt impressed to do an interfaith women's conference here. So we did an interfaith women's conference, breaking down barriers, trying to invite all faiths to come together as women, wives, mothers, aunts, and sisters, and give hope, tools, and connection for our community and family.
That's beautiful.
It was incredible. And people, it was interesting, go back against the pushback. And if people say, well, I don't know if that's a good idea, go with your gut. People told us it takes a year to plan this. This was in January. We were going to do it in April. And they said, you'll be lucky if you have 75 or 100 people with this kind of thing, right? Refugees, interfaith, that's not really a big ticket buyer thing. And I went, you've got to be kidding me. And we had 600 women at that event. And I have to tell you, we have given tickets to refugees, and we made way for them to be able to come, because a lot of times they didn't have transportation or childcare or things like that. And we were able to open up and work with Amy Harmer to bring those refugees to this place where they felt loved. And I will never forget the second one that we did. I looked out, and here were women with their burqas? Is that the right word?
They're hijabs. Just their hijabs.
That was it. I just think the right word, because burqas are different. I know what those are.
Yeah, burqas completely cover.
Yes, they're hijabs, and they were beautiful in all these different colors, and we had such diversity. So the point that I want to make for our listeners is that as you're listening to us today, I'm sorry, this is a little teary episode for me. As you're listening today, I hope it does make you resonate and tear up a little, because it is happening right now for 70 million people around the world, and more will join, and it could be one of us. And I encourage you and implore you that if you've been feeling something, to get in connection with their story, our story. It's reputable. It's all over the globe. They do incredible work. And I love that as you're listening, if you're thinking, well, I can do this little bit, or I could find out about the education materials, I could read to someone online. Those little things, go to one of these. We will post these on my social media and below this podcast, these references, but for sure, you can check out tsosrefugees.org and just go click on their website and connect with them, and they will get you connected. Do a Google search, all of those things, wonderful. But please connect with this organization. I always like to go with organizations I can trust. I know what they're going to do on the ground and also behind the scenes and in the bureaucratic side, on the administrative side. And I can absolutely 100% give a seal of approval on this of my second place of they are fabulous. Is there anything else you want to share with people listening?
Sure, you can jump right onto our Facebook page too, or our Instagram page. So our social media is very active. It's always scrolling through. We're always posting stories there. The head of our Utah chapter, if you have a large number of Utah residents that are following, is actually the editor of that book, that beautiful book that you held up. The chief editor is Twyla Bird. She lives in Ogden. She's one of the founding members. She's heading up our Utah pilots, which are many and powerful. We're establishing a scholarly archive at Brigham Young University, Global Refugee Archive, which will be accessible for everyone around the world. So you're actually really fortunate to be in this geography because you have actual team members here and leadership here that can help you. So go on our Facebook page. We'll try and make connection with you there, Instagram, and also our website. Yes.
Absolutely fabulous. And I am thrilled to know that we have such easy access to be helpful. And even with this particular case, and people will be listening to this down the road, whatever your situation, whether you're in a quarantine, not, if you're affluent or not, if you're busy or you're not, whatever your situation, every little bit matters. And I have seen that for myself as I hear stories just recently of people's acts of kindness. What a difference that has made. People going, a man went into Chick-fil-A and gave an $8,200 tip so that everybody could be paid in that store. A man in Arkansas with a building that he owns with businesses on the bottom said, this month don't pay rent, pay your employees. All of these things. Another woman, she was standing in line and she had a child who had a blowout, and this was right at the beginning, and she couldn't find diapers anywhere and she had to go pick up children, and someone in the lines didn't have any wipes, and the lady said, here, take mine, because there wasn't any left. These kinds of things. From the very smallest of just sharing of what we have to the more middle of how can I help and share my talents and abilities, everything makes a difference. And what I'm hearing from you, again, reminding you that really and truly, their story is our story. We are all refugees in some way. And whether we are right now into a severe degree, or whether we will be in the future, we will all have this experience and that beautiful karma that comes around of how will we treat, who will we become through this. It is, like you said, learn from their experience, how to be resilient, how to stay in a kind space. I want to close with this. I loved this from Hamed Aryan. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Hamed Aryan, a very good friend of ours, a member of our team too.
Yes, yeah. She's a refugee. Is it he, she? He, sorry, refugee coordinator says, my tears are running down and remind me that we are, oh, this is a friend of his, a refugee, Hamed wrote back to this, he's writing it down. My tears are running down and remind me that we are really not alone in this bad situation and massive world. All I know is God sends real persons to fight for us and to help keep hope in a bright future. We believe there are angels surrounding us, even from far away, that consider us and assist us, even though we don't know them. All these families are hoping people will listen to our stories and the problems we have. We want to wake up the sleeping conscious. I just have to say, is that the most beautiful way to wrap this up? That we can be the hands and the voice of hope in the very little things that we can choose to do. At the very least, pray for the help and health and well-being of these wonderful people. Melissa, any last thoughts before we leave?
Thank you, Connie, for having me here and to be able to share a little bit of what I've experienced. I truly believe that the cosmos is conspiring to teach us about love. That's the bottom line here. That's why we are here. The cosmos is conspiring to teach us about our dependency on one another and how loving one another will actually be the power that saves us in the end. So.
Absolutely beautifully spoken. Again, this has been Melissa Dalton-Bradford. We are talking about their story, our story, and you can find out more at tsosrefugees.org. please reach out, do something today, even if it's the smallest thing. It all matters. And thank you for being with me on Balance Redefined Radio. You can get more at conniesokol.com, and you can subscribe below for more of these life-changing podcasts where we can all come together and make a difference. Thank you so much.
Thank you.